Evening, everybody, and thank you all for joining, and thank you all for watching tonight. We've got a very special guest, and he was here about 10 seconds ago, and he's had to bail out because his camera wasn't working. So we're going to try and bring him back in. Hopefully, we'll get back in without any problems, and we'll start the podcast proper when he gets back in. He's a real nice guy. He's a Yorkshireman. He's a veteran. Did 22 years in the British Army, and he's now getting involved in politics with the SDP, which I think is commendable, because obviously we need good men in politics because there's so many bad men in politics at the minute and so many weak men in politics at the minute. So he's a leader. I think, again, without sort of stealing too much of his thunder, he ended up as a Regimental Sergeant Major in the British Army. I think this is Dave coming in now. Let's just see. We've got the same problem, I think, with the thing, but we'll add him in anyway. Let's have a look. What if I can do it that way? No, that's not going to do it. Okay, we'll add him anyway. See what happens. Right, Dave, can you hear us, mate?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, we've got the same issue with the camera there, Dave. I don't know if you can just mess about with it, see if you can get anything going at your end. Yeah, because it's just not showing any camera there at all. As long as nobody minds, Dave's what I'll tell you now. Dave's a really good-looking fella, so you're actually really missing a treat tonight, ladies, when you're not seeing Dave. But if we can't get seeing Dave in person, we'll bring him on. Are you happy enough to do it without your face showing, Dave?
Yeah, I'll be mysterious, no problem.
Yeah, okay. If yeah, exactly, mysterious man. I mean, without stealing your thunder, Dave, Mo said that you did a lot of time in recce, so that's why we're keeping you hidden. We don't want our recce elite soldiers having their faces shown on Richard's YouTube video. So
next door.
Anyway, let's crack on. If you get the camera sorted out, great. If you don't, we'll just go as you are. So, cool. Dave, tell us a bit about yourself. Obviously, Mo's told me a bit about your background. Just give us a bit about you growing up, and obviously why you joined the British Army, and just what regiment you served in, and how that all panned out for the. Well, obviously, you can't give us the whole 22 years in 5 minutes, but just a quick background to who you are, so people have a good idea of who you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah, my name's David Bettney. I grew up in South Yorkshire, born and bred on a council estate. Like most people in South Yorkshire, I'm 55. Like most people in South Yorkshire at that time, you should have 3 choices. But 2 of them were taken away from me. So the one was the steelworks. They shut down in the early 80s, just before I left school. And then the pits shut down just after I left school, through the issues with the miners' strike and what have you. So the only sort of 3rd option or 4th option was Dole, but the 3rd option was the army. There was no jobs as far as the eye could see. Nobody knew anybody who had a job. So I had flirted with the idea of joining the army from being a kid, because I think we all had action men and stuff like that. But in the end, I think it was I was chosen out of a cast of me because there was no other jobs. So I joined, but I never looked back. I did enjoy it, and well, I say enjoyed it. Not initially when I joined in 1987, because the army was a different place then. There was a big issue with bullying and stuff like that.
Yep.
And also it was a different time. I remember being on my Lance Corporal card in 1989, and he's quite wise, the RSM of that period. He says, you're going to see a change in the army now over the next few years. He said, because the people who are in charge now on the warrant officer senior NCO scale, he said a lot of them had the choice of going to Borstal or joining the army. He said, so, when they're in the 60s and what have you. He goes, and they're just dying out now. They'll be coming to the end of their careers. And so you will see the army change, and it did. It became a lot friendly. It was still obviously the army, but it was quite brutal before that, because you did have a lot of bullies in charge of key positions, and so instead after that we got more professional, as I should imagine, as an army. But that was, I loved it. I loved every second of it, but it was a bit brutal in the early days, because for the reasons I've said, it wasn't.
I mean. Yeah, totally. I joined in 1985, Dave. So I signed up in 1985, started my basic training in early 1986. So I was going through probably the same things that you were going through at the same time. What regiment were you in, Dave?
I started off as 13, 18 Hussars, and then we amalgamated to become Light Dragoons. So all I ever did was reconnaissance. That was my job for 22 years.
Brilliant.
And
right.
so,
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just to give context, I was born in 1986.
Right. Yeah, you could nearly be my son.
Mo, you must have had a really hard paper round, mate. I'm telling you, you must have had a hard life. No. I mean, you know, so you did recce. What was that? I mean, what was that like? I mean, I was in the infantry, so mine, you know, my career was basically, you know, section attacks, you know, skillet arms, all that sort of stuff. That was kind of what we did. But what did the Light Dragoons do? What was your, obviously, you know, if it's not, you can't share some trade secrets. What was your sort of normal day job on a deployment? Because I know you did Afghanistan and you did, I think you did Bosnia as well. Did you do Northern Ireland at all, or did you not?
No, I didn't. I put in twice to go to Northern Ireland, but each time I had a career course.
Yeah.
So it was one place I've always felt I missed out on because everybody who served there. But having done Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, I was happy with my operational tours.
You made up for it. Yeah.
The level we got to, but at the time, Northern Ireland was that nearest you came to sort of war, as it were, before you'd gone to war. So absolutely. It's a regret I've always had, and I've always felt embarrassed about it because my mates, you know, everybody else or most people I know had gone, but I never did. So I got the 4 white feathers for Northern Ireland.
Well, do you know, I mean, I tell you what, I mean, you know, I did 2 years in Northern Ireland when I was 18, 19, and it was certainly a baptism of fire. But I think you guys that did Afghanistan and Iraq, you know, you had it hot and heavy. You know, the people that were actually at the sharp end had it hot and heavy for a good few years there as well, Dave. So I don't think there's any, you know, I mean, the bottom line is whether it's a bullet in Northern Ireland or a bullet in Iraq, it's still going to have the same effect, isn't it?
Of course it is, and obviously those theatres of war were far more kinetic than you know Ireland and what have you. But we've got a long history in Ireland, haven't we, as the British Army, and it's where everybody cut the teeth. So
totally,
it was something that I missed out on. But to answer your question, like recce was always the ginger step kids because we weren't infantry, we weren't tanks, and whenever we deployed anywhere, people always misused us. And they went, oh, well, you know, they'd use us for crazy tasks. We're like, well, that's not you. Because as you know yourself, the battlefield split up into, or was back then, it's different now, but you had long-range reconnaissance, which was SAS. You had formation reconnaissance, which was us. And you had close reconnaissance, which each infantry battalion and tank regiment had their own COP platoon or COP platoon, you know, close observation platoon or the recce troop if it was tanks. So we sat theoretically in full-scale war in the middle of that, so in front of a battle group, but obviously not as far up as special forces would be because they would work, you know, 150 mile in front of whatever. And as thing was supposed to be 75 mile in front of tanks and infantry. That's the theory, the Cold War theory. So that's what we practiced for on our own all the time, and nobody like really knew the existence.
And I think if I mean, again, just from sort of memory, I mean, I only did 7 years. I got out in 92. But from my memory with what you guys were doing, you did quite, your courses were quite hard courses. You did all the LERPS courses and all that sort of stuff, didn't you? The long range recce course, am I right? Was that you guys that did that?
We flirted with all the like special forces stuff, but we didn't.
Yeah,
we were just, as I said, we were the ginger step kids. If we deployed, so for Bosnia, for example, not in the early days, it was fine. During the war, we went as Light Dragoons, but in later tours, then they would assign one of our squadrons to an infantry battalion, and they would just use us for literally filling sandbags or something. They thought we were like pioneer company or something.
Oh, goodness sake!
You know, it was. I remember going on one thing and doing the beat up training for Bosnia with the Yorkshire Regiment, and we were a Yorkshire Regiment anyway, but you know, the Yorkshire Regiment from the infantry. They were giving us all these tasks. Like, they thought we were bottle washers or something. Anyway, we were trained in lots of different weapon systems, everything from low level infantry tactics to everything from forward air controlling and everything in between. So it was only Iraq wasn't so bad because we went out and had his own battle group in Iraq. So it was like Dragoons battle group. So for the first time ever, we could say, look, this is what we do, and people are like, oh, I didn't know that. And then same with Afghan, it was like Dragoons battle group. So we had a company of Mercians attached to us. We had a company of Grenadier Guards attached to us, and it was our what they call it. It was our train set then. So we could do our proper reconnaissance job that we trained for all as life. And we spent, I think we did in the recce vehicles that we had at the time. They're now on Jackals and what have you, but at the time it was scimitars and Spartans and that sort of thing to get us around the desert. And I think it worked out in the 7 months that we did. We did about 2.5 times. The track mileage was 2.5 times around the earth that we did, because we went everywhere from Barum Char on the Pakistan border all the way up to Musakara and everything, and all towards the disputed region, the tribally administered areas between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And we used to take a load all as kit with us. But if we had a particularly, there's only a couple of times this happened when we were particularly heavy fighting, then we would have ammo and what have you parachuted to us and supplies. And we just got them and put them on his vehicles and carried on. So we did our proper recce job for the first time ever in my last sort of 3 years of my army career. And so I was like, thank God for that. I managed to do it. So we'd done soldiering, but we'd never done his job. So that was good. I enjoyed that. I'd got my lads. There was like 120 of us, and we were out for a month at a time. And we'd come back to camp for about 3 weeks every month just to collect mail and what have you. But there were nearly a month-long patrols, 2 weeks off, whereas everybody else were in major camps, and then the infantry were in the FOBs, and they would patrol obviously outside the FOB, try and clear a couple of miles and come back in. But we were out on the Pakistan border and we were trying to find the enemy's logistics supply line and everything else, and obviously brass them up in their areas rather than waiting for them to come. And like the FOBs were just they were just magnets for attacks, and most of the infantry just had to defend most of the time. They would go out and do clearance patrols, but it's very difficult because, as you know, the fire you go out from a FOB, the weaker you are, because you go a couple of miles out, you're very thin on the ground. So they had to stay and hold the ground, the infantry lads, but we went nosing about hundreds of miles in the area of the rear area of the enemy, and just had some fun finding them and mixing with them. So it was great. It was a great.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, you know, I think it's great, and it's really interesting. I mean, just knowing the way that, you know, like I say, I was only a short time, but knowing the way the army works, and you don't have to be in the army too long to realise that there's a lot of dick swinging, there's a lot of people misusing people and not really understanding fully what's happening, then covering their own arses, but you know, even though they don't understand what's happening. So just with you saying about the way you were completely, your skill set was completely wasted until the last sort of 3 years, it just shows you the inefficiencies in some of what goes on, doesn't it? Which
it did, but the problem you had the problem you had in reconnaissance, remember, to be in charge of a battle group, the only way you're in charge of a battle group, the only cap badges that count is if you're infantry or cavalry. And the only way you get in charge of a battle group is if you're a tank regiment, not a recce regiment. Because the only time we went to Battus was to play enemy. We never went to Battus as a regiment to practice the skills within the battle group, because we didn't work within a battle group. So we suffered from our senior commanders never became brigadiers really, or in charge of a battle group, because that wasn't our thing. So when we were given to people, nobody had experience with us, and so they were like, "All right, well, we've got some areas we need to clean or whatever," and so we just like, "Oh my god." So it was only when Afghan come along, and it was proper reconnaissance territory for our type of reconnaissance, which was more find, fix, and strike, as opposed to just snuggling up, spotting them, and reporting. This was going out, finding them, and destroying them. And we had all that firepower. You know, we had 16 30mm cannons with us. We had javelin troop. We had I had a forward air controller on my vehicle and one on support troop as well. And we had everything at our disposal. I say everything. We were a tiny battle group in its own way, and that's what reconnaissance is. It has its own it has its own foxhounds, as we call them, infantry. It has its own tanks, which are not because they're little scimitars, but it has everything it needs to be a little battle group on its own and go around and wage its own war. And Afghan was ideal for that. And I'll say now, I had a lot of respect.
Afghan, were you?
Go on, mate.
Lost you there, Dave. Say that again, mate.
Yeah, I just said.
Say that again. Lost you there, mate.
Yeah, I'd got a lot of respect for the Taliban. They were a very tenacious enemy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've been at it for a long time, haven't they? Because they've been at it with the Russians, and then obviously, they were at it with each other, and then of course, the Allies, drop in on them, and they've been fighting, I think, since 1979, non-stop, pretty much. So, they've plenty of experience, and in terms of that sort of formation. So you were in scimitars, you and how many vehicles did you have in your unit under your command? Because obviously, okay, the CO's in command, but you're the RSM. I take it you were the RSM at that point. Were you when
I
you
was the Sergeant Major. I was Beast Gun Sergeant Major.
The Afghan tour.
Yeah, on Afghan, okay. I was Beast Gun Sergeant Major.
Right. So okay, so you're right. So you're a squadron.
Yeah, we were a squadron, and we had what would it be? 16 scimitars, about 6 Spartans. I think it's about 20, and then we had a few Winnipes and stuff with us. I think it was like 20, a package of 25 vehicles, and maybe a few more actually, because we carried our own fuel as well spare. So yeah, there was about probably 30 of it, a group of 30 vehicles, and we were given instructions by the brigade commander of the areas he wanted us to sort of have a look in. And some days were really long and boring and filled with flies, and others it was just kinetic as hell. It was just big massive firefights, and it was great. You were either bored to death or just about to meet death. That was the sort of thing.
That's the way it's meant to be, isn't it? And in terms of success, I mean, would you say, obviously the different roles, but would you say, in your own experience, were you having more success than the FOBs were having? Because obviously the FOBs, I suppose, are about, sort of static, like you say, very, very short range foot patrols and winning hearts and minds and that sort of thing. Do you think in a military context, you were having more success and I suppose killing more of the enemies is what we're talking about than the infantry guys that were in the FOBs?
I think everybody claims to have more kills than everybody else, but I would say, I had mates who were other Sergeant Majors in the FOBs that I knew from Sandhurst, because I was a CQMS at Sandhurst years and years before, so I knew a lot of the infantry boys anyway. And they were defending themselves for most of it, and they were under a lot of pressure. But it was different for us. We were going out, finding them, and hitting them at their place. So I'll not give you a number, but we neutralised a lot. I'll be honest, a hell of a lot. And so bang for the buck, I think we delivered, for the cost it would cost to put us in the field. I think we got a great return. Having said that, there was an endless supply of new recruits for him. So I don't think we'd have had enough resources ever to make much of a difference overall. But we did. To an extent, for my career anyway, and for our time out there in the desert, it was probably, I'll say, it was our finest hour. We did really well. Yeah.
No, it's good to hear, and it's just hearing that from a different angle, because I didn't actually know that you guys were doing that role out there. So I mean, the fact that you guys were doing that role, which is really quite a sort of, I mean, it's almost you know, everyone talks about special force all the time, but it's kind of just like one tier down from that, really, isn't it? What you guys were doing, because again, normal infantry regiments, because they're so kind of big, and you know, it'd be difficult for an infantry regiment to do what you guys were doing. So you guys were probably the only unit or units, the light, you know, the light recce guys would be the only units that could actually do that role. There's nobody else could really do it, could they?
There was a group from the Paras run, which was called Task Force. I can't remember the name of it. There was them, submarines, and whatever else it was. But they didn't have the fluidity that we had, and they didn't have the protection. They didn't have the ability to. And truthfully, they were great soldiers, obviously, but they weren't vehicle soldiers. So you've got to be a bit of both, because you've got to be able to milk it and get it working again. Rather, nobody's coming to help you. So you've got to be very self-sufficient. And so, yeah, we were a different beast, because we were like, you know, half man, half wheels, whereas the infantry mainly just all boots. And so that's where we come into a zone, because it was our bread and butter to get a vehicle from A to B over really shitty land when you don't expect it to get there. And so, yeah, but to answer your question, no, we that role is like a semi-special forces role. And in our reconnaissance role during the Cold War, the Russians used to treat us at where we were on the battlefield. Their tactics was that we were special forces. But truthfully, the average infantryman is probably far more robust than we are. And, you know, he's a little killing machine. But, yeah, it was our time that time. And we, you know, luckily, for all the skills we learned all the years from all these different courses and stuff, we finally got to put it into thingy rather than just emptying the bins and what have you for everybody else. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a great story. And what I mean, obviously, without sort of traumatizing anyone, what sort of casualties did you guys take? Did you get away pretty scot-free, or did you take some hits?
We took some hits, but none of my lads died. We had a few injuries. We had a few vehicles blown up. Yeah. A few vehicles destroyed totally. In fact, they were destroyed, but then we had to use javelins into them so that nobody could use them again. So they were made immobile and immovable, because we were hundreds of miles away from anybody else. You can't tow them anywhere. So you know, a couple of times, and one in particular, we had to use our javelins on our. We'd already lost the vehicle, and then we had to spend. I think the javelin missile was like 40 grand a piece, and we had to spend a couple of them just like adding insult to injury, wasting a vehicle. We did, and I did as the Sergeant Major out there. Obviously, I'm in charge of prisoners, I'm in charge of casualties, and I'm also then fighting on a flank myself for most of the day, because we even our REMI guys, we give them an area to like our fire support and what have you. So they were really hands-on. They loved it, and I had a lot of time for the.
I was going to say that.
I just thought, I thought you spanner wankers, but once they're out there, they absolutely proved themselves to be amazing at the job, and they were up for a fight every time. Yep. They're like, wow, and they loved it. I think the guys, I keep in touch with a couple of them. I always say it's the best soldiering they've ever done.
Yeah, it's so. Yeah, it's so true, because when we were in West Belfast, obviously it was nothing like what you guys were seeing in Afghanistan, but it was tense enough, and we used to take some of the cooks out on patrol, and they used to love it. We probably shouldn't have done it, to be quite honest with you, but we used to take them out, and they had SLRs. For some reason, we'd SA-80s, they'd SLRs. So you'd have a patrol, and then you'd have this cook with an SLR, not looking like you really knew what he was doing, but they love going out and deploying. So no, that's great. They're great stories, Dave, and I mean. I think that the other thing is what you're giving there is a positive story, because you hear so much negativity now from people that's done Afghan and people that saying, oh well, it was a waste of time and this, that, and the other. What do you think about that side of things? The people that are saying, well, we didn't achieve anything and it was a lot of blood spilled for very little return. What's your take on that?
I'll give you my take, but just to answer the last bit of them, we did lose some light dragoons. We did have some lads killed out there, but just none of my lads. And so, some paid the ultimate price. And I think I remember it was Light Dragoons Battle Group when I was there, but I think out the battle group, I don't know if it was, I think for R2, it might have been for the year, but I think it was R2. I think we lost 35 or something like that across the board. I think
35?
I remember the Grenadiers. My mate was company sergeant major down there, one at Forbes, and they'd got 8, and we weren't too far away. We came in the morning, and we helped them get the bodies because they'd been out on a clearance patrol, but they'd made a mistake. They'd gone to the same place a couple of times, and they'd put an IED in there, and a section, 8 blokes all got done in a wanna. And so we went down the next morning and went in front to put it's a ring of tin, really, with a symmetry. It's not a ring of steel, but we're to put a ring in front of them so they could go get the lads and get them back at first light. And so the reason I said that is, that's like, I think it might have been 6 or something, but it was like 6 or 8 in a one. In fact, it was however many was in it. I think it was a section. None of them come back. So we had to wait till morning then to go get them. So that gives you the numbers, just in one night in one place, you can lose, 6 or 8 or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
was that a vehicle? Was that a vehicle?
No, that was a foot patrol.
That was a foot patrol got wiped out. My goodness, 8. Wow.
They'd seen them there a couple of times. I think they put a daisy chain or IEDs, but it absolutely, I can't say too much because obviously there's somebody's sons and things or whatever, but,
Exactly.
I'm not mentioning names, but, the weapons that were melted into them, they're just absolutely, wiped out. So it did happen. It was brutal. But I would say it was lucky for me. It was one of them sing while you're winning. And so I have a different take than other people to Afghan, and I'm very lucky to have had it the way I had it. It would have been totally different if we'd have been taking the level of hits that we were giving to the enemy. And so to answer your question, I personally really enjoyed Afghan. I didn't. It's full of flies. It's thinking, but as a sergeant major, and as reconnaissance, when you've trained for all that time, it was. At mine anyway, whether I was good or not, I don't know, but it was our finest hour. So I loved it, if you can say that about war.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I do, I was an absolute prick. I had my own pith helmet and everything. I thought I was at Rorke's Drift. I was absolutely sold into it all. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And so, for me, it was a great thing towards the end of my career. But to answer your question, like, was it worth it? Truthfully, no, not overall, because if you remember, we went for very vague reasons. What we're going for? We're going because girls are not allowed at school. Okay, all right. That's an infringement of civil liberties. And if we are stronger than other people, then we should try and help the weak. But then when you get there, and I'd spoke to Mum about this before, there's sort of 2 harder lines of Islam, and one is the Sufis in Saudi Arabia, and the other is, I think it's Deobandis or whatever it is in Afghan. And so unless you were gonna kill the people to set them free type thing, you were never going to change them. You would have had to at gunpoint get everybody to change their version of Islam, because it was a fairly strong one, and that can't happen. So really, you got to say to yourself, we could never change that anyway. And I got a great quote from one of the tribesmen out there. Well, I say great quote, it's probably not that great, but he said, I was talking to him because we're always on the ground trying to talk to people and get information, what have you. And I said, yeah, we're here, we're going to be here for the next 20 years. I was lucky enough as a warrant officer to be on a briefing with somebody quite high up from the State Department in America, and they're saying these are the reconstruction program for Afghans. So I'm thinking, yeah, we fight the war, and then we're gonna bring all sorts and flood them with modernity type thing. And obviously that never happened, and what have you. But an Afghan tribesman said to me, he said, "You'll not be here in 5 years' time." Or whatever. I said, "Oh, we will. There's a big plan. We're going to." Remember, the British Army's had its ass handed to it about 4 times in Afghan over the couple of 100 years. And so we're like, "Oh, I'm lucky." But they're like, "Mate, every time you come, we do you." So it was. He says, "You've got the watchers. You own the watchers. You've got the technology business because you've got the watchers, but we've got the time." Like, yeah, you have, because if you sat in your own land, eventually
that's what they say. That's yep.
There is a onus on, actually, if you think about it. It's not just now. It's even during the time of Alexander, when he tried to, conquer it, but actually went around it, sort of a thing.
It's always been the British Army's graveyard, Afghanistan.
Yep.
So,
and I mean, I think it's interesting you're saying about the Dear Bandy as well, because Dear Bandyism was a reaction to the British Empire. It was a fundamentalist, Muslim reaction. It started in India, believe it or not. I think it's a place called Dear Band somewhere in India, and that's where it started. And the scary thing is, 40%, at least 40% of British mosques are Dear Bandy.
Yeah.
Are Sunni Dear Bandy mosques.
Yeah,
and nobody ever talks about that, because obviously the Dear Band. Sorry, Dave, I lost you there, mate.
Yeah, so it was. I could see moments. It was you that froze, or I don't know, but I could. Yeah, I think I was still in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were talking about the mosques in the UK. It's not one of them when you're trying to talk about other team, you go before anybody says, "Oh, I've got loads of gay mates" type thing. But no, but with Islam, my best mate in the world and business partner's a staunch Muslim, but he says, "Oh my God, what are you doing in the UK?
Yep.
You are absolutely inviting in what will probably end in a civil war at some point, which is crazy. It's crazy." So it's darker than people think. And before anybody says Islamophobe, no, the best mate in the world on the planet is a Muslim. But you've got to either not know anything about the world or live under a rock not to know that we have imported, like years ago when Muslims used to come to our country, a lot of them were, and still are, some amazing people who come with their families and what have you. But the changing point, remember, was 1979 when Ayatollah Khomeini, it's Shia, not Sunni, but it was what they call the Cloak of Islam came over the Middle East, and it started to change how everybody saw the West and how everybody saw themselves. And so anybody prior to that date was just somebody who'd come from a former Commonwealth country, come with a family, wanted to work in textiles or whatever, and had different religion, had different dress, but essentially were just family people cracking on. Since that, there's been a lot of effort from small groups, but successful groups in the Middle East and the Muslim world to really sort of fire up the jihadists and get the very worst ideas of Islam and then push them into the very heart of Europe. And it's sad really, because we went to Iraq and Afghanistan. Both, I will say now, that were illegal wars. We shouldn't have gone, but we're doing what the politicians said, and the politicians say that they're doing what the people wanted, but clearly not just what the globalists wanted or whatever. But while we were going to these places and trying our best to sort of separate groups of people from fighting each other, whether it be tribal fighting, whether it be especially the collapse of Iraq after Saddam Hussein, there was a big power vacuum. And so everybody's trying to fill that. And you also had foreign fighters from all over the world flooding in to have their operational tour and making Iraq even worse for the Iraqis. And so, we at the very time we were sent to Muslim lands to so-called liberate them, we were filling our country up with people that didn't like us for some of the right reasons, because we've just been firing at some of their guys. But behind us, they're just filling it up with people that are not compatible with most Western ways and are totally different from the first lot of Muslims that came to the country for a long period, really. So I think when they talk about Islam, you've got to look at anybody post 1979, and not exactly that date, but Islam changed. Most people, and if you remember in the 70s with the Beatles and stuff, women could travel in Afghanistan. You could. It was a big hippie place for people to travel through, and they're the same tribal people, the same whatever. Why did they also all of a sudden some of them become quite barbaric? Because when the Cloak of Islam came down under Ayatollah Khomeini, it changed a lot of the way people used to see Islam and worship it and preach it before that date until after. So I think that's quite, it's quite significant in itself that Islam changed after that date? You
I
can
think
say
like even during the 1970s is where where Pakistan changed itself, when General Ziaul Haq came into Pakistan and did a court martial and put Bhutto, who was the prime minister, to death, and he took over. That's when he started Islamizing Pakistan, because before that, Pakistan used to be on the English Penal Code. It was Pakistani Penal Code, which was based on English common law. That's how they used to operate. And then General Zia came in and he started putting Sharia into Pakistan law, and he opened up I think so. Before that time, there were like few hundred madrasas only in Pakistan, and after that, they came like I think so 50,000 or something madrasas, and they started growing and growing and growing. At that time, people thought, oh, it's a good thing. People are gonna where education cannot be reached. Saudi Arabia and Qatar were even at that time in 1970s, Saudi Arabia and Iran actually at that time were funding the madrasas in Pakistan. Also, it would be really good, they can educate, but they didn't realize what they were educating on was not really education, but they were being radicalized.
yeah,
And that's where
indoctrination. Yeah.
exactly. So even when the Pakistanis that have come into Britain after 1970s are a completely different breed of Pakistanis than the ones that came before. And you can see like the ones that came before have a very different view. They have eventually become more moderate in how they appear and stuff. Like we can discuss the ideology itself, right? So ideology itself outside of people, and we can say the ideology is corrupt, whatever, because that's what I say as an ex-Muslim, that there's a problem with the ideology. But obviously how people take on ideology and how they work with it is a bit different than the theological discussion itself. So they are like there is a strain of Muslims, like even in Arab. That's why I can understand your Muslim businessman friend as well, because Arabs got rid of this, like prosperous Arabs from Dubai, from Kuwait, from now Saudi Arabia is trying to do that as well. They're trying to get rid of these people, a lot of them. That's why even like someone like Osama bin Laden had to go to Afghanistan to actually practice his radical ideas, because it wasn't acceptable even in Saudi Arabia. So it goes to show like there is a problem in that region where they are more receptive. The Yobandis are more receptive to the radical Islam, and we start getting these people uh, into United Kingdom, and we don't realize, and we don't then monitor the mosque as well. If someone says, okay, we should monitor mosque, the straight response is like, oh, why don't we monitor churches? Well, I don't see any Christians going around and bombing places, so obviously we have an issue. And when people bomb places and when people do terrorism activities, it harms everyone. It's not just one group of people, it harms everyone. So I think so like that is true. Like, it's a very important point what David is saying as well. Like at the same time, when we were killing Muslims in their own countries forcefully, giving them liberal democracy, which obviously you need centuries of of a civilization coming to the point where they themselves accept democracy, right? They have to elevate themselves. You can't force these things onto other people. But when we went out, we started enforcing. Maybe there was a minority in those countries that were already receptive of democracy, but not the liberal democracy, but not the majority. So we're forcing that on them. We're killing their people, right? And we're destroying their country for absolutely stupid reasons as well, because there were no weapons of mass destruction anyways, as we found out later. And then at the same time, we're flooding these people in from other places, right? So it's all connected, because for a lot of Muslims, especially who are radical, it's all one ummah. So if something bad happens in Iraq, the Pakistani Muslim is going to feel as much aggrieved, and they would want to
Yeah.
do something if they are more
Well,
radical.
that's
It's a
right, and
constant thing.
that's what oh, what's that girl that was on Paul Thorpe's channel, Lubna. That's what Lubna said. She's because I said to her, I says, look, does the Muslim community not feel aggrieved that you've now got loads of Muslims coming in to your areas that are a lot more radical than the normal than the normal run-of-the-mill Muslim. And she says, no, a lot of them embrace them because they see them as their brothers in the faith. So, and in the book, I think it's Among the Mosques by Ed Hussein, he was saying that the problem you've got in places like Manchester now and Bradford is that the young Pakistani Muslims are now getting influenced by the older Syrian, Iraqi, Sudanese, Lebanese Muslims who are coming in, who are radicalized, and they're going to the mosque, and then they're now re-radicalizing a young generation of Pakistani Muslims who might have been a bit more, if they'd got the chance to listen to their parents and this, that, and the other, might have been a bit less radical, but they're actually getting pushed towards those radical strains. So rather than radicalization becoming less, it's becoming more. And Dave, what's the answer to this? I mean, we've talked about this so many times on different podcasts. What do you think the answer is to this?
I think we've got to have a
potential, like you said, there's a potential for real conflict.
Yeah, I think unless we have honest conversations with everybody, and including obviously the Muslim community, and ask, where do you see this country then in 10 years, 15 years time? What would you like to see? And if they say the same as, like, well, a liberal democracy, whatever, if they say like some do, Sharia law and the rest of it, then we've got to decide that these people that think like that are not compatible with Britain. Now, of course, if you're a British citizen, that causes other problems as well, because we can't, we've all got rights as British citizens. But I think anybody who's not born here that doesn't share our values should be made to leave, because I go around the Middle East and I'm allowed my own values. I'm not allowed to project them on anybody else. And if I disagree with how they run their country, I've got an option. They can either kick me or I can leave, but I don't stay and tell them that I'm not happy with it. So we're going to have some trust. Obviously, there'll be tears before bedtime, and it will start some kind of conflict, but that's coming anyway. So you either deal with it and then talk to most people and say, look, are we going to turn this island into something decent together, whatever, whether we're black, white or covered in shite? Are we going to come together and do the best and look at it like a football team, and we're going to try and get up the league, because as a country we're not doing that well. We keep slipping down a position every year. So together we can do it, but unless we find some what they call it, some factors that bring us all together, we're just going to balkanize Britain, and it will become like the Balkans, and then you will have the Bosnia war, because there's that many different factions all wanting different things.
Yeah, I mean,
identities.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, we've been doing something, Dave, demonstrations called Uniting the Kingdom. What we've been doing, bringing people together from all, we're saying it doesn't matter what colour you are, doesn't matter what religious background you're from, it matters what's in your heart. Are you British in your heart? In other words, you've got red, white and blue in your heart. And it's been quite successful. They've been quite sort of multi-ethnic, multicultural, but not multicultural in the sense that that's been pushed on us, where you've got these silos where different, beliefs and ethnic groups grow up on their own and never mix. We've been really bringing people together, and I think you've been to a couple of them, Mo, hadn't you? To the United the Kingdom demos.
Most of them,
to a couple. Yeah. So I mean, we've been doing that at grassroots level, but there doesn't seem to be a willing government to do that. And how can
you can't?
Yeah, there's two questions. First of all, how
the main parties are. They're either globalists, or they're too polite, or they want to go to polite dinner parties, and they don't want to be the one who stands up and says, look, we need a sea change in it. We need to absolutely do a 180 on what we've been doing, because where we're going is not going to be good. And we haven't had either they've been controlled opposition, or we haven't had, the average politician hasn't got bollocks. And we are lions led by donkeys. That is definitely true. And you know, at grassroots level, there's a lot of people want a different outcome for Britain, but our ruling elites, and whoever you seem to pick, they say something, and then smoke and mirrors, guess what? They do exact same as the other team did anyway. But we need to have a discussion, because what the left's done, they've got it totally mixed up between ethnicity, being a multi-ethnic society and being a multicultural society. Nowhere on earth does a multicultural society work.
Exactly.
Multi-ethnicity, that's cool. You know, it's a couple of pigments of skin color. That doesn't mean anything.
Absolutely.
And we can all have shared values. You know, what it's like to be British, what it's like to be whatever it is. But what we have done, multiculturalism, they go, well, what about Dubai then? That's not multicultural. There are many cultures there, but there's one dominant one, and that's Islam. And that's you know, if you come to Dubai, you can never have a Dubai passport. You can never vote. You pay your taxes here. You do whatever. And they know that if they did, it wouldn't be an Arab country in 10 seconds. It would be changed to some kind of liberal blob of whatever, and it wouldn't have an identity. And also, their ancestors have built this place, and they've defended, you know, their part of Arabia for thousands of years. To give it to Johnny come latelys for him to turn into some kind of liberal group hug thing. Like, no, I'm Muslim, I'm an Arab. This means something to it. But they've got the balance right here. They say, come and do what you want, do whatever religion you want in Dubai, be whoever you want, enjoy yourself. I mean, I was in Dubai a few weeks ago, and genuinely there's a big mosque, and it was during Ramadan, and then an Irish bar about, I don't know, 80 meters away, and the mosque would have been there before the Irish bar, and this is a Muslim country, but they have no issue with that. And the guys at the mosque, they just went to the mosque, they'd like say hi as they go past. Nobody's got like an angry version of Islam there. They do their thing. You be you, I'll be me. But it works because the overall dominant culture and rules are of what the Arabs want, and that's fine. Somebody's got to be in charge. But so in Britain, we then said, oh yeah, you can have multiculturalism. That doesn't work. But they wanted to not be racist, which is good. Multiculturalism is a different thing. Sorry, multi-ethnicity is a different thing. That's what we should have been heading towards, multi-ethnicity. And instead, the left have brought it in thinking, oh, well, this group can have this and this group can have that. Well, then you've just created tiny little countries that will become bigger countries within one country, and it just becomes tribal. So that was a mistake that I said the left have made. The Tories have been liberals for like 30 years. So we've had a double helping of liberalism from both the left and the old right. And nobody's said, look, we draw a line in the sand. Let's have some big chats. Let's get people from all different stripes around the table and talk about where Britain's going to be, our shared values, who's on board with them and who's not. And then at least, you know, when the music stops, we can all have a look at each other, and at least there's an honest dialogue to be had, because at the moment everybody's got their fingers in their ears pretending it's all going to be fantastic.
And the thing is, Dave, I mean, sadly, the way things are going, I mean, I've no faith in reform whatsoever, and they seem to be the only party on the centre right that seems to have any chance of challenging the status quo at the minute. Obviously, there's a lot of things bubbling under the surface. Ben Habib's looking at something. SDP, you guys are doing stuff. UKIP that I'm involved with are doing some good stuff. But it seems like we're going to get, you know, Farage, which seems to be Tory Party Mark II, and the problem is, Dave, what happens to the country if we don't have this discussion and we don't have these open, honest debates about what's happening with these extremists, you know, how they can be de-radicalized, if they can't be de-radicalized, and it seems like they can't be. If you look at what's happening in the prisons, these guys have been in prison for a long time. Nobody seems to be making great strides at de-radicalizing any of these people. What is that? What is the future for the UK? What do you think it'll look like if we don't do something about this in 10 years'
time?
If
we don't do something, it will end up like the Bosnia War. It will, you know, the Balkans War. You will have loads of different enclaves. You will just be one dysfunctioning country of pockets of different people with different, like ardent lines, both left and right, and everything in between, and different religious and ethnic groups, I should imagine, which always happens when a country goes to pot like that. But what we did, we lost not the people. Most people are switched on, but our ruling classes. There's a thing we've always carried as Britain, which has been an handicap for us. If you look at our ruling classes, right from 1066, when William the Conqueror came over, if you look at it took about, so everybody spoke, it wasn't the same language then, but spoke English at the time, apart from the people that came over. And remember, they were all Vikings to an extent, but the ones from France who came over. But it wasn't until literally Queen Elizabeth where we started writing stuff in English, because everything at the courts was always done in French, in like the palace and what have you. And so we had been, we'd been sort of, our aristocracy had fallen in love with the French way. And even today, you see sort of aristocrats, they'll kiss each other on each side of the face when they meet, like French do and that sort of thing. And that was never an English thing, because they still have that sort of... So what I'm trying to say is there's always been tension between our ruling classes and our people, because they were originally different people. And then if you look at it, when by the time it gets into the 17th and 18th century, they've always fawned over everything Europe. So if you had money, you did the grand tour, you went to Italy and you went to Rome, and you came back to your country houses and you built neoclassical follies, and they were always in love with Europe. But nobody was in love with us, quite rightly. We were a bit rough-assed and that sort of thing. But all our ruling classes always thought, they always held Europe put it on this pedestal, and always put England down. They never extolled the virtues of England. Of course, there was some passionate people, but if you look at the way that they viewed culture, it was always Europe and the rest of the world's really intriguing and we're crap. And truthfully, we probably were, because Europe didn't pile here in numbers anyway and go, oh, you've got to do the English tour. It's amazing. If you're a rich Italian and a rich, Spaniard, you wouldn't come and do the English tour like they all went to tour Europe. And so they've always thought it were better over there. We, as the working classes, have always been just proud of our lot, even though we lived in a hovel. And, we're probably quite violent and quite vulgar for most of our thing. We loved it. We loved the fact that it was our soil and we'd been there for ages. And even though we hadn't culturally advanced that much as the lower classes type thing. So we've always had a real love for the soil under our feet and our landscape and our brothers around us, brothers and sisters, regardless of, what they are. And our ruling classes have always thought we needed to be like dragged into Europe or dragged somewhere else because we're just not cool enough, or not, we're too uncouth, should I say.
Yeah.
So I think part of that is...
I agree.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, so you've grown up with nobody really, apart from the odd aristocrat that, loved his land and maybe loved his thingy. Most people in power never really loved England. They always loved somewhere else. And so you get it today with liberals. They'll say, they'll go, well, what's British culture anyway? Is it just egg and chips and tracksuit bottoms or something? And whereas anything else, they'll go to I don't know, the South American jungles, or they'll go to see the Aborigines in Australia, and they go, oh, it's amazing, and they've got this paint on the face, they've got these didgeridoos, and they make a big fuss about them. And it's crazy because they love everybody else's culture, but hate ours because they think it's too trashy. But if somebody just has the most basic culture, they're all over it and they buy the clothes and everything. So we've always suffered from, we're the only culture in the world, our only country really, that suffered from our ruling class pretty much being embarrassed about us and embarrassed about what we do. And that's never really changed. So it's rare you get somebody in power that goes, do you know what? Cut me and I bleed Britain. I bleed this place. They just go, well, we could sell it off and I could always move to Dubai, and we could, they don't see it as like a forever home, like the people have, and like people have all over the planet. They see their home as a forever home, and ours have not. So I think that's one of the things we've suffered from. How we move forward with that, well, slowly we get people up there that are passionate about the country, that are passionate about communities. Again, whatever stripes you are, it doesn't matter. But we only build a good country if we've got good communities and not split in all to many different communities. So we need, it's easier said than done under our first past the post system. If we didn't have that, you would have seen Britain change a long time ago, and people in position that just loved the country. And that is a good thing, because if you love the country, you'll do anything to defend it, to make it prosperous, to make it better for the next generation. And so Yeah, we haven't got to give up, because even though Reform are on an eye at the moment, I am suspicious that Mohammed, their chairman, that he'd worked for Goldman Sachs and then came into politics from nowhere at 37, 38, just like his mate who worked for Goldman Sachs and came into politics at 37, 38, Macron from France. I'm not saying he's his mate, but what are the chances that you work for somebody that has circular ownership of BlackRock, and then, hey, guess what? You're just at top of a party. So there's and Ben Habib is actually backing, as for the Donny Mayor at the moment. He's endorsed us. So, there has been a split in Reform. People who can wake up will realise that it's been it's what they call it, it's smoke and mirrors, really. And now the people involved in Reform, a lot of them, their heart's in the right place, but already it's been, in my opinion, it's been took over.
I agree. I totally agree, Dave. And I mean, I've been banging this drum and supporting UKIP since the elections, before the election, and I kind of wobbled a bit just coming up to the election. I thought, well, UKIP's got no chance of doing anything, so I kind of promoted Reform a little bit before the general election, and then regretted it bitterly. It was peer pressure from Paul Thorpe, but no, I think the reality is that we need to find a way, Dave, of bringing the SDP. I've always said this: the SDP, UKIP. A rump of Reform, get rid of Zia Yusuf, get rid of Tice, get rid of Farage, unfortunately, for everyone that loves Farage, and do something, and get Ben Habib and what he's doing with GB Pack, and get some of the right-wing Tories, and see if you can get this all into a big pot and mix it together. And I mean, Mo's been telling me a lot about the SDP, over the last few months. And at the end of the day, I don't think there's a cigarette paper's difference between what we all believe, to be brutally honest with you. I think the big problem that we've got, there's not.
I was a UKIP member for about 10 years, and I only left UKIP when it sort of melted. I was just a member, but when it sort of melted in 2018, really. And Henry Bolton, who'd been briefly the UKIP,
that was my fault.
Henry Bolton, and Henry come over to the SDP. So you've got a lot of like-minded people. But in pockets all over the place. But the difference is it's an ego thing. Nobody wants to give their party. Not an ego thing, but you've seen it so many times when they amalgamate. For example, with the SDP and the Liberals, when they amalgamated to become the Liberal Democrats in 1990, the SDP got kicked to grassroots, and so did the Liberals. They didn't die, and that's where the SDP got picked up and became Eurosceptic about 6-7 years ago. It was in mothballs, but they brushed it off, because you can't kill a political party unless you decommission it with the whatever it is, the
electoral commission.
Electoral. And so because they've done that, as I said, the SDP sort of started a revival, but it didn't benefit anybody when the SDP and Liberals amalgamated at the end of the 90s, or the original parties did anyway. So it's not always, I get you, the more divided you are, the harder it is. But somebody has to pick one of the parties and rally around it. And that's very difficult, because if you go all in, as you've seen with Reform, it can just get took over, and you're like, oh God, if they'd have kept their independence, everybody, they might have given different voices on the same subject.
Yeah, but that's the problem with Reform, isn't it? This is why I supported SDP before that, and I, like Richard, regretted as well telling people to vote for Reform before, because with SDP, the thing that I like is that you have an equal voice as a member. You can vote in and out your own leaders. You can vote in and out your policies as well. They are actually protectionist. So they want to protect England. They want to protect Britain. I know, we talk about not having an issue with multi-ethnicity and stuff like that as well, but that doesn't mean SDP supports turning the whole country into 90 Momus, right? Because if you turn the country into 90% Momus, yeah, it would be a brilliant country maybe, but it won't be Britain anymore, right? Because you need the native ethnicity to be in high majority for that country to remain that country.
I
That's how
think
Dubai remains Arab. That's how Kuwait remains Arab. That's how
Yeah.
Turkey remains
yeah.
Turkish. That's how
I
Italian remains
think
Italian.
though, Mamas, I think that ship sailed now because of
Mhm.
demographics. I think that ship we've got to look at not what we'd like, but where we're going. So we've passed that point. But what we have to do now is, like I said, get people together from all stripes who have common shared values and just say, where do you want the country going to? Because it's not going to go into a nice place. And so we can never make Britain, literally probably from when Blair started having very liberal immigration policies. We can never get that back down, because what we never did, and fair play to anybody that came to Britain, we never told them they had to be a certain way. We just said, be who you are, and that's cool. Until what you are is quite. If then you're extremist, then that's not cool, and we didn't realise that. And so we've now got so many people in Britain that, as I said, there's going to be troubled times ahead. I'm telling you now. But how we negotiate that, we can make the landing a lot softer if we rally sooner rather than later, and address some of these issues. And of course, you'll get called worse than shit. You'll get the press, the left-wing press or the liberal press will try and hammer you for everything. But if you get enough voices, and day to day get a little bit stronger, I do equate it to when you go, what can be done? What can be done? Remember, in 41 or whatever. But by 42, the Germans had not only took all Europe, but half of Russia and all, and nobody could ever see an end to this. We were all going to be swallowed up by the German nation. There was no way back from it, and we were only on borrowed time as Britain. We just said we'll just defend it to the last man, and it is what it is. And if you'd have run that model, all right, there's certain things with Italy being nuts and a few other things, and they did overreach themselves, but there was chance there for literally the right to run for 1,000 years. And so if you were a Brit in 1941 and you just had your ass handed to you at Dunkirk, and you'd had most of your army in Asia locked up in camps by the Japanese or whatever, you'd lost everything, and Europe had all been took and swallowed up. If you'd have accepted and go, oh, well, there's no what you can do, then we wouldn't have been here today. So I'd say to anybody, don't worry if it's past the 11th hour. We can get it back to something like, but we have to understand, like I said at the beginning, it's going to be a lot harder. Every day we leave it makes it 10 times harder and makes the potential disruptions down the road a hell of a lot more serious.
Yeah. We definitely have to close the tap.
No, I think that's right. And I mean, I think there's a few things that sorry, Mo, was just.
Yeah, there's a small lag, Richard. That's why.
I think there's a lag, isn't there? We're sort of talking over each other. But I think the reality is there's 3 or 4 things at play here. One's a cultural thing, and me and Mum was talking about this the other night. And to me, the culture of England is Christianity. I mean, that's the bedrock of it. And if people, whether they like that or not, is up to them. But that's just a historical fact that we've had 1,000 years plus, 1,500 years of Christianity that's kept us moderate and kept us sane and kept us from doing crazy things. So I think that's got to be reinvigorated somehow, and that's something I'm going to be pushing and trying to work on. And then I think with the political side of things, there needs to be this whole idea of what Nick Buckby calls the Grand Coalition, where you bring all the parties. You don't have to lay down the SDP or lay down UKIP. You find some way of getting everybody to work together and give everybody some sort of buy-in, so that you can basically divvy up all the different constituencies and say, well, UKIP's got a good chance in Manchester, SDP's got a good chance with Dave in Doncaster, and find a really intelligent way of doing it. And you can probably do that a lot easier now than you ever could. And that's where it does come down to ego. And, what's the brilliant bad. What's the guy called that runs the SDP?
William Coulson.
Yeah.
Well, so William picks up the phone to Nick. Nick picks up the phone to Nigel. Nigel speaks to Kemi. You know, Ben's got his new party, so he's speaking to everyone as well. And you've got things like the GB pack. Something like that needs to happen. Otherwise, I think we're going to be in for I mean, if we get another Labour government in 4 years' time, I think that's going to be catastrophic. So we've got to find a way of navigating these waters and getting everybody to work together. Because, like you said, Dave, UKIP aren't going to lay down the baton. Ben's new party's not going to lay down the baton. Reform, well, I think they're, you know, I don't have any trust in Reform, but there's got to be a way of bringing people together in this way to
I think,
even constituents.
Yeah, and I think it starts, believe it or not, with conversations like this, because I'm a big believer that just little conversations around the table, that they're the type of things that have ended up conquering new worlds and doing whatever. And it starts with a few like-minded people.
Absolutely.
Just seeing what synergy they've got, and then laser targeting that effort into one area and having a breakthrough. And so, yeah, there's definitely some conversations that we all need to do, because I watch, you know, Paul Thorpe's podcast, you know, his YouTube videos and stuff like that. And there are many people, again, from all different backgrounds. All they want is just a sensible conversation. And there are millions of people that would agree. But the trouble is, you have to be organised. And we find the problem in the SDP is because we don't suck up to big business or unions, that quite rightly nobody wants to give us money, because they want to control you if they give you money.
Yeah.
And the only way you can be way you can be true to the people is if you haven't took money from interest groups. But truthfully, in politics, you need some money to be able to at least compete with the big boys. But as we showed up in Leeds, when we got councillors up in Leeds, all they did, you know, the first year they went around, everybody got us wrong in everything. Oh, you're socialist. No, not to do with socialism. Well, it says social. I know it's like sports and social club. It's not sports and gulags. And they're all right. And then they go, well, aren't you Scottish? No, that's Scotland. This is SDP. We've been in mothballs for years. Yeah. But it took us a few times. And then people started like, oh, well, fair enough, but you've got no chance. So we started getting better at each election, just targeting one area. And then a lad put loads of effort in, and then he got in as a councillor just on his own merit. And then another one got in, and then another one got in. And these were big, strong Labour seats, huge majorities that we had to overturn. But we didn't do it overnight. And you've got to replicate that across the board. If anybody thinks this is going to happen quick, even if everybody comes together, it ain't. But it's a bit like Churchill. It's not the end, it's not the beginning end, but it's the end of the beginning. Once we have these conversations and we start it rolling. But it's doable. We've showed it's doable without money, without whatever. And, you know, I stood in the general election and the South Yorkshire Mayor last time. And in the general election, I come 3rd out of 9, Tories and Labour beating me. And in South Yorkshire Mayor, I come last. But in Donny area, I come 3rd and beat the Greens and Lib Dems combined. And I had no campaign on any of these whatsoever. I'd just put a leaflet out. They'd seen me a couple of times then, and they went, actually, he talks sense. And they'll give you it's hard just to win votes, because everybody, you know, unless you've got the Reform and you've got the trumpets blaring all the time and the drums banging and attention, it's very hard for smaller parties to do that. But I've told you, already I started getting traction. And if you just pick an area and do it, and you're honest, and I've been to different hustings, and the feedback I've got is, and you can see it online, they go, do you know what, he's the only one who talked honestly, because the others talk in riddles or say, yeah, the reason we like this is because of blue team, or the reason we like, no, I get the reasons why, but what are you going to do about it? So I'm telling you now, it's doable. I've seen little movements, and they're going to bigger movements, but we have to accept that Rome weren't built in a day, and it's very difficult to get the people's trust, because quite rightly, they've seen every new party come in and then be same as the other parties, or every, you know, even main party say, I've changed now. That was so last year. We're not like that. And then, of course, they do the exact same once they're in power. So it's about gaining trust off the people. And we can't expect people to vote for us in droves until they trust us. And they can only trust us when they see you regular there and you're giving regular grown-up answers to questions. Like William Clouston's always on Talk TV and other things, and they'll ask him about the boat crisis. They'll
Yeah.
ask him about the debt crisis. They'll ask him about whatever. And a very learned man, and he'll give you straight away an answer, a yes or no, not a Tony Blair who used to ask him a question and he'd go, yeah, the question you need to be asking is, he wouldn't even answer the question. He had the arrogance to tell them what question they should be asking. Whereas William Clouston will answer it to a T. You're under there's no smoke and mirrors. You know where he sits on everything. He doesn't do the political thing where I'll just try and get every voter along. Yeah, but you're just going to disappoint everybody then by coming up with wishy-washy answers. So it's turning up week after week, year after year, being honest, starting to get a presence, and whether that be UKIPing, let's say, Kent or Summit or whatever, if you do it repeatedly, then they'll not worry nationally that you're not the top of the polls. They'll go, do you know what, we've had some good people, they come and say the right things, and actually they've won me over. But we have no right to expect anybody just to give us all the votes just because it's the right thing to do. They're so busy with the world, paying the bills, running the relationships, and they don't need extra white noise by going there's yet another party who says, but listen to me. So you have to fight for them votes, and you have to fight ward at a time, and you have to accept that it's a long battle. Now, will it be done in time to save everything? Who knows? But unless you start, you can sit here and talk all the time, like for the right reasons, or you can actually make things happen.
I want to answer that. Someone asked about ECHR. So I did wanted to answer that about SDP, because SDP was the first parties, even before reform, that said that they will withdraw from 1951 UN Refugee Convention, the ECHR, and all other international instrument which deny UK border sovereignty. So SDP policy has been, and it's not just a talking point. So there's a policy laid out of how they will do it as well. Because most of the time what I see on reform is very good at stealing SDP policies. All the policies that they have policy points, they steal from SDP, but they only have points. They don't actually have the work behind it, which SDP has put down, of how they're actually going to achieve those policy points. So most definitely SDP's policy is to get out of ECHR, International Refugee Convention, and any other international conventions that tie us down and stop us from applying our own laws.
Yeah, I think that's the only way forward, because again, already with reform, Nigel Farage says we're going to have a referendum on the
We don't need that.
UNHCR. Yeah. But if you have a referendum, surely the very people who voted you in are voting in for that reason. So then to have a referendum and put it to a bit like the Brexit, where it could go 50-50 again, that's nuts. Just say that's what you're going to do. And the fact that he's going to have a referendum on it, I don't know why that would be, because whenever they don't like, the chances are it's going to get overturned. Vote them in for a policy, not that should be non-negotiable, because you all see the pressure that we've got on our NHS and everything else from the world at the moment. So if you're just on and again, nobody qualifies actually for a refugee, really. France has not been at war since 1944. And so anybody fleeing France, you're about 80 odd years too late. And so, that's non-negotiable, that. And for the fact that Reform want to have a thing, it says to me, they're really trying to nail themselves into centre-left. They're talking centre-right, but already, to me,
they're already filled with liberals anyways. And the important point is, as we saw during the Brexit as well, Farage doesn't really do details. He doesn't have the next step. So, he's going to push something, and he's going to get it on populism because of it, but he doesn't really have the next steps of how he's going to achieve it. This is why when you listen to William Clouston, someone like William Clouston over there, he will give you those hard answers, not just because he wants to be popular or anything, but he actually knows what he's talking about, right? Because I think so, in all of the leadership, in all of the parties, he's one of the most learned person out there who really knows things inside out. And he is the one who wrote down and put down the new declaration for SDP as well. So it goes to show, like, he is a policy guy. He might not be he might not be your Beyonce of politics, but he is actually someone who will get the work done.
He's not just somebody who can get the work done. Everybody's special. Like somebody's good at 100 meters, somebody's good at 5,000 meters or whatever. He Farage he carries the room, he carries whatever. But whereas William Clouston is so well read and so knowledgeable on every subject, when anybody gives him a long form interview, it blows them out the water because he can, anything you mention, he can go, well, yeah, that happened in Singapore in 1964, and the reason it went wrong was so and so, and that was tried in thingy, and he's really interesting to listen to and all. But you've got to be somebody who wants proper answers and not just like clickbait and yes, let's change the country. Yeah, but what does that mean? Yeah. And so I am quite lucky to be in his party, as it were, or share the same party with him, because he is probably, and I've worked with some very intelligent people. He's probably the most intelligent person I've ever met, and he's a really nice guy. But he's not a shouty politician, and anybody who reads then doesn't need that. They need somebody who would actually really make big decisions and change. Now, is it our time for SDP? It's not yet, no. But are we building? Yeah, day by day, I've seen a huge difference. I joined them about after the sort of, it's not fall of UKIP because it's still going, obviously, but you know what I mean? When it's peak and it was sort of lost for a bit. And then since Nick's come over, he's sort of breathed some new life into it. But I left about 6 years ago. And I was never political anyway. I was just a member. And then I listened to a podcast and saw William, and I thought, well, it might be small, but it's perfectly formed. And I'd much prefer somebody who knows the right thing to do than somebody who's just popular. And so, yeah, from then, he then started getting more and more people in party. And then we started getting some, what they call it, councillors. And then we've started getting regional guys. And I've had my deposit back last couple of times. I've stood for mayor and general election. And that's without a campaign. That's just with your thing in the mayor's brochure. So if we do start working it hard, I think we could turn it over in a period. And that's all we need. We just need and there's a lot of people working hard in different parts of the country. But yeah, as a group of people from all different parties, we do need to link up a bit and also share. I think we've got a lot to. It sounds a bit big-headed because the UKIP used to be massive back in the day. But we've got a lot to share. We've got a lot of ways we can show you how to win seats, really. And I'll say Europe. And we learned them by somebody who left the Lib Dems and come to us, or I should have said, not we as a party, but me. He left the Lib Dems with their stance over Europe because we were always Eurosceptic. That's why Paddy O'Flynn left UKIP as an MEP and come over to us, give us our first sort of like rung on ladder. Then people like he's joined what? Is it just it's a party on paper? But he come across as an MEP, and William had just started at the time. But yeah, it's. I do think there's a lot we can help sort of fellow patriots with, because if you win in little areas, if nothing else, at least we change the Overton window and start getting people then. Once they're scared that they can lose the seats, they might be actually parroting some of the stuff that we're all saying, and then that gets into the public square, and hopefully then words become deeds, become actions, and so on and so forth. So I do think we're on a journey here, and I wouldn't worry that there's a mountain to climb, because throughout British history and world history, we've always been at the edge of being annihilated or whatever, whether it be Spanish Armada invading, whether it be the French invading, whether it be the Germans invading, whether it be whatever, if there's a latest version, if there is an invasion as such going on, we'll find a way through it, and yeah, it's never easy. But I do see the steps started. We started building a few years ago, and like I said, I can already see some good green shoots. So it's doable. It's definitely doable.
No, it is, and I think these sort of discussions are really important, because if we can have these very laid back discussions where nobody's we're not trying. I'm not trying to get anyone to join UKIP. Well, obviously, I'm trying to get people in the comments, but not trying to get you or Momus to join UKIP. And I think it's almost a bit like the regimental system in the military, Dave, because you think about if you when you were in your regiment, I was in my regiment. If we'd have come across the paras in a pub, we'd have probably fought cat and dog with them, until the the MPs came and nicked us all. And it's a bit like that with the with the parties. We're all fighting like cat and dog. But at the end of the day, if we could find a way of, when the military deploys, they don't fight when they're on deployment. They fight against the enemy. But in the barracks situation, they'll go at each other like nothing else. So I think it could be, if we could find a way of getting that same camaraderie where the parties can come together, because most of us know each other and are friends. I mean, I've known Mo a couple of years now. We've done a lot of these podcasts. We're good mates. I know
we just need to sit down with like-minded people and have a beer or a meal. Yeah. And then ideas come or don't come from that, but at least you know that there's it's like the old advert, it's good to talk. And so I think if you get enough like-minded people around the table, you'd be surprised what can happen from that. In nefarious ways, like the Jackal Island meeting of when it was 1919 or whatever, when the bankers took over the federal what they call it, the
Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve. Yeah, and they were a bunch that met. And obviously, we haven't got their power. But what I meant is, they sat around and they decided the fate of America. Now, I'm not saying we can. What I'm saying is, people around the table can decide things that can have huge, effects in the future. So we probably about 10, 20 of us that are like-minded from all different parts and all different stripes. Just need to come round because nobody's got a monopoly on good ideas. And there might be something that somebody says, well, do you know what, I'll take that back, and that's good. And if not, it's always good to at least meet with people that are wanting a better Britain. And I'd welcome anybody coming, but I just think probably more intimately initially, just 10 people or something around have a dinner in wherever, and then you'll not be fighting each other in pub type thing then.
No, definitely not. We're too old for that, Dave. Anyway, do you know what I mean? You could have done that when you're 18, 19, not when you're in your 50s. But no, I think so. And the other thing is, Dave, you've got a secret weapon in the SDP. You've got Rod Liddle, and not only is he a very intelligent man, he's probably one of the wittiest men that you'll ever see on any of the talk shows or any of if you see him on any of these things like Question Time. He just cuts people to shreds in a very sarcastic and dry way, and so that's a big plus that you've got Rod Liddle sitting in the SDP. Now, he may not want to sit with the likes of me and Tommy, but we'd certainly sit with him for sure.
Yeah, he is a character, and what he's got with sarcasm, he's got an equal helping of intelligence and all. So it's good. It's just always, his comebacks and the way that he can explain it, and his use of English as a writer anyway. But he's just good. You can never get him tongue-tied ever.
No, he's a special kind of. There's very few people like him. Mark Stein's very similar as well, but there's very few that have got that sort of dry wit and actually understand what's going on and probably understand what needs to be done as well. So what's next for you then, Dave? What's the plan? Because obviously you're standing. Tell us about where you're standing. What's happening politically and what you're going to do as an individual.
I'm standing as Doncaster Mayor on behalf of the SDP. I've done a few things. I did Hustings the other week and a few other bits and bobs. But if anybody wants to see anyway, they can just go to the SDP website, click on, I think it's media, and then there's my points, what I would do for Doncaster, what I stand for, and everything else. But yeah, I think anybody who's listening to one of your podcasts, I would resonate with him because we're all singing from the same song sheet. So I'm a voice that started to get a bit stronger there. I think I did well at the Hustings. For the feedback I got is that I beat the other candidates purely because since I got out of the army, and I do run several fairly large businesses. So I came. It was lucky for me. The Hustings. It was a business Hustings. If it had been something like on child protection or whatever, I wouldn't. It's not my field of expertise, but they got the business community into Doncaster Chamber of Commerce, and they filled an auditorium up and asked us all questions. It's online anyway, Doncaster Chamber of Commerce YouTube, and I just stood up and said what was why the current plans for the airport are probably not happening and what I would do, on the three sort of questions they asked us all. So yeah, I'd like to think from that and the feedback I got that we bring in a better conversation. You know, for example, I'm not knocking him. The guy who's the reform candidate is a 30-year-old estate agent stroke model, and that's cool. But he didn't know anything to say. He had no answers for anything. And he just kept saying, look, but at the end of the day, the country needs reform. Yeah, it's a good title, mate. It's catchy. It's in your thing anyway. Good. But what would you do? And he had nothing to say. And I felt sorry for him away because he's been thrust into that position. He's a good-looking kid. And, they thought, they were flashing his six-pack all over to, young lasses and what have you. That's great, but they're not voting. It's old women that are voting mainly because it's local elections. So it'll be, people who want a little bit more substance to the questions and what have you. So he was a particularly rabbit in the headlights. And if that's the best that reform can do, that's a bit embarrassing because I'm sure they can do better. They're a big brand now and they're attracting a lot of people. But yeah, so all I'll keep doing is because I call a spade, I don't do any political correct stuff. And it even said on my Doncaster Free Press thing, it says, former Regimental Sergeant Major says he doesn't do politically correct, he'll always do what's morally right. And I do if they say, well, what's your stance on this then? I don't put sugar in it. I go, well, I think like this and I think it for that reason. And I've had it with the BBC when they were doing interviews with me. Well, don't you think that's, I don't know, sexist, racist, or, they always come with an ism or something, they have to eat you something, and you go, no, not at all. Because if you go outside here and talk to most rational people in the street and in the working men's club, they don't think like the BBC, they think like this. And they're like, oh, okay. And so I stand my ground, and that's one thing, if nothing else, you get honest answers. And the more sort of people who throw their hat in the ring in politics and speak honestly, the others will have to start doing it. And so, yeah, I'm just saying what we're all thinking when they ask me questions.
And Ben's backing you as well.
That was David, pretty good. That Ben agreed to do it. And so in the mayor booklet that goes out to every house in Doncaster, there's me and 12 of the candidates. But on mine, it's got Ben Habib saying, forget what colour party you normally vote for. This is about the best man for the job, because we didn't do politically correct and said best man for the job. And he goes, by far, with his military and then his business experience, and that he was born and bred in South Yorkshire. He said, this is without doubt the best candidate. And so it was a great endorsement from him, and I really appreciate him doing that. And it wasn't for him to stick two fingers up at reform, because a lot of people know each other in the background. Our lot asked him, and he went, as a former Regimental Sergeant Major, and because I've never seen him do wrong and whatever, I'll back him, because I do think he could bring real change to Doncaster. So he gave me full endorsement, which was a bit of a coup, really, to have somebody who was the second in command of reform last year say, whoever you vote for, whatever your party are, it should be Dave this time. So that's nice.
Dave, I hope you don't mind. I've just put your email on the screen there. If you want to take it down, I can take it down. But I'm just thinking, if people want to get in touch with you that are in the local area, it's David.Bettney at sdp.org.uk. Yeah. Okay. That's so if you want to get in touch with Dave, guys, if you want to get in touch with Dave, because obviously we're going to bring this to a close now, because we've took an hour and a half of your time there, Dave. And do you know what? It was my sort of podcast, because I didn't have to waffle on. It wasn't like there was no shrinking violet on the. We might not have seen your face, Dave, but you weren't shy. You know what I mean, mate? So, which I think is great, having someone that can talk. You know what I mean? So, if you want to get in touch with Dave, David.Bettney at sdp.org.uk. When's that election taking place, Dave?
I think
when's the actual election? Is it
1st of May? So we've got about 2 weeks away.
2 weeks away. Okay, 2 weeks out. Well, guys, if you're in that Doncaster area, I know there's not many people on tonight. It's 578. Or if you know people in the Doncaster area, let them know about Dave. Let them know what he's doing. Get in touch with him by email. If you like what you've heard tonight, get in touch with him. Have a chat with him. This isn't party political. As everyone knows, I'm on the NEC UKIP. And, I'm not promoting Dave. I'm not saying, vote for Dave. But get in touch with him. Have a chat with him. And I think we've got to keep doing these sort of things where we bring people in from so many from lots of different backgrounds and have a genuine discussion where people can get to know you. It's as simple as that. I mean, they've got to know you, almost getting to know you as well, Dave. And we've done it on Paul's channel time and time again, when we brought people on and just giving them free reign. And as long as we're not getting any goose-stepping Nazis or weirdos, we're happy enough to give anyone a platform that talks sense, because that's what it's about. It's about common sense. Dave, thanks for coming on, mate. And it's been a fascinating podcast. The stuff about Afghan, really excited, really exciting to hear all that, to hear, how your regiment did in Afghan. Great to hear about the business stuff, and obviously we genuinely wish you all the best for the election and hope everything goes well. Can people find you on social media anywhere else apart from through the SDP website? You've got your own channels?
No, it's just the SDP email, really. But I'll answer anybody's question.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously going forward, we'll try and get you on a few channels as well, Dave, and just if you want, we'll try and get you a bit more profile with some of the people that we know, and get your voice out there so that people know you, because the reality is, sadly, social media is where it's at now. So we're gonna have to start pushing. All of us are gonna have to start pushing our videos and doing more and more of this sort of stuff. Well, Dave, thanks very much for that, mate. Really, really enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for everyone that's watching. Sorry I didn't do much with the comments. I was too busy listening to what Dave was saying to actually focus too much on the comments tonight, guys. So, and again, Momus, thanks for coming in and introducing us. So we'll do it again. We'll do it again another time, Dave, because that was good steam. Enjoyed that, mate.
Yeah, I can tell you about the last 15 years building businesses in Iraq and what that's been like.
Yeah,
building businesses with the very people that were trying to kill each other only a few years before that. It's been a journey. But thanks ever so much for your time tonight. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, David. Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. And like I say, I'd definitely like to do that. Find out about the stuff in Iraq, because again, that's all about reconciliation stuff. If you can build businesses with people that we were literally at war with, well, that could be a skill set that we need in the very near future, if we can start bringing people together and having a sensible outcome to what's happening in the country instead of all the crazy stuff that people are predicting. So,
absolutely,
good
building
stuff.
bridges.
Dave, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Exactly, reconciliation, 100%. All right, cheers. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Yeah.